As it is, humanity each year uses resources equivalent to nearly 1.5 Earths to meet its needs. Humanity would need 5 Earths if everyone lived as profligately as Americans. We are now living in a world where the population is thriving, where rapid urbanization is taking place. And because of this, the demand and need for consumer goods is higher than ever.
Why is China claiming sovereignty and some other countries are competing for sovereignty is because of the energy supply.
While resource conflict has been seen throughout history, it is likely to become more prevalent in future decades. Is resources in conflict. It has been predicted that most 21st century wars and conflicts will arise from water scarcity. Conflict over the Nile River is brewing in several countries, and they may be forced to fight a water war. Egypt depends on the Nile River for 95% of its water needs for drinking and agriculture. This problem is compounded by the projected large population increase in the Nile Basin. The UN projects that the population in the 11 basin states will reach 860 million people by 2050.
It's clear that the construction of this dam will have a negative impact. The water share, which is already limited, will be lessened, and this is the real challenge. We are approaching a major problem, which is water shortage.
Though diplomatic procedures have been attempted, none have been successful in resolving this conflict.
We have to work harder on trying to find a compromise that will, in the end, serve all. Because this way, this will be a win-win situation for all the Nile Basin countries. But if we don't have this kind of arrangement or agreement, we all lose. And I don't believe that any of the Nile Basin countries want to see that.
Some damage to natural ecosystems is inflicted intentionally and is intended to harm enemy soldiers or populations. During the Persian Gulf War, Iraqi soldiers torched more than 500 Kuwaiti oil wells and dumped thousands of tons of oil into the Persian Gulf. The entire region was engulfed in black smoke for months until the fires could be put out, and there were lakes of oil as deep as 6 feet leaving behind heavy environmental damage. And although most of the oil gushing from the ground burned in the fires, a sticky residue formed lakes that marred the landscape of Kuwait to this day. This may be a past issue, but the environmental effects are still present in society. China and Japan have long struggled over the ownership of supposedly oil-rich islands located in the east, known as the Diaoyu Islands to the Chinese and the Senkaku to the Japanese. The dispute over the islands and the maritime borders around them has continued for years, due to the fact that the islands house significant resources like oil, natural gas, minerals, and metals.
Because you don't like North Korea, we don't like Japan.
Why don't you like Japan?
Why don't you like North Korea?
But why?
I mean,
is Diaoyu China Island or Japan Island?
What?
Diaoyu Island. Who owns Diaoyu Island?
Chinese, China.
How would you fight for Diaoyu Island?
Definitely. Would you fight for Hawaii? Would you fight for Hawaii? Would you fight for Washington, D.C.? We would do the same thing.
Japan's Prime Minister repeated Tokyo stand that the nearby disputed Senkaku Islands are Japanese territory. He added that Japan will not back off on the issue on their sovereignty over the territory, which China calls the Diaoyu Islands, claiming that they were stolen from the country at the end of the Sino-Japanese War in 1895. This conflict has not been resolved and is still ongoing. China has been quoted as saying that China will never waive its right to protect its core interests with military means. Until a diplomatic solution is found, China and Japan will still be fighting over the sovereignty of Diaoyu or Senkaku Islands. It has been predicted that most 21st century wars will be caused by conflicts over natural resources. In these conflicts, both developed and less developed countries will fight over oil, minerals, land, and even water. In order to sustain resources in a world that is becoming increasingly dependent on natural resources, we must find alternative resources or ways that are cleaner, safer, and more abundant in order to evade conflict. Last year, 16-year-old Egyptian scientist Azza Fayyad developed a way to turn recycled plastic waste into biofuel feedstock, the main raw material in creating biofuels. Her idea of utilizing ethanol to power transportation vehicles not only provides a sustainable, clean fuel source, but also addresses a solution to the pollution caused by plastic waste.
Into a range of hydrocarbons that could be used as fuel feedstock in many petrochemical industries, but actually I was focusing on the hydrocarbon fuel production. The new about my project was to use a better catalyst. It gave better results actually.
Conflicts over oil could be prevented with an abundant and safer resource. Conserving water can be done by scaling down the use of it. For example, encouraging farmers to water their crops at night helps minimize evaporation. Another example is to use wastewater collected from sinks and showers that has been treated and refined. This is called grey water. This grey water, which often contains phosphorus and nitrogen and other gases found in fertilizer, can be used to water certain crops. It should be noted that the grey water is often rich in alkalies and thus not suitable for all crops and flowers. In the modern world, the water is reused in the house. However, it would be beneficial to utilize this water for farming. The use of grey water means overall, less water is being used and more is conserved. Funding for these projects, as many agree should, come from redirecting military spending, which we can infer will decrease as these new alternative resources come about. Last year, a shocking $1.75 trillion, equivalent to the GDP of Canada, was allocated for military spending. To place these numbers in perspective, the total cost of achieving the 6 UN Millennium Goals, ambitious goals to better the welfare of developing countries, is $120 billion in additional resources, a mere fraction of what is spent every year on militaries. After researching these conflicts, we can see that we are now living in a world where resources are limited, where population is thriving, and where rapid urbanization is taking place. Conflict is clearly occurring due to the fact that we are competing over resources. In order to remedy these conflicts, we must compromise within our own nations and within our own communities in order to create a world where we resolve conflicts, we can fairly share resources across the global community.